this video, we're going to look at the design for the Legend Events database. We're going to be using the entity relationship diagram method. Let's have a look at the information that we've got. We've been asked to create a database for Legend Park Hotel. The hotel provides facilities for customers such as training and meetings. To assist with the catering planning, Legend Park ask for details of guests and any dietary requirements. The database will record information about events, customers and guests. Dietary requirements of guests can be non-vegetarian, vegan or gluten-free. There are two types of events, training and meeting. The cost per guest at an event must be between £10 and £50, and the number of guests at an event must be between 5 and 100. Look at the data that we're being given for Legend Events. We're going to see if we can identify any primary keys and any potential entities, and look at the data to identify any relationships. So for example, can a customer book more than one event? Can an event be booked by more than one customer? Can an event have many guests? And can a guest attend many events? Just a reminder, the purpose of relational databases and getting the design right, we're aiming not to have any duplicated data. So what does that mean? Well, let's have a look at this data here that we've got. Let's look at, for example, customer number 1, Green. If we key all these details into one record in our database, that means we'll be storing the customer's surname, Green, 4 times in fact. 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want to be doing that. We want to be able to store that surname, Green, and his details, his phone number, just once. And then that means we've only got it in one place. If we need to make any changes, 1, we only have to make that change once, and 2, it means we're making more efficient use of storage. Right, let's have a look at the data. So we've got attributes, customer ID, event ID and guest ID. I suggest they're going to be primary keys. And if they're going to be primary keys, that means we've got entities, customer, event and guest. Let's have a look at the customer first. We've got customer ID 1, and we know that's for customer Green. We've got the same phone number, the same house number and the same postcode. And it looks like Green's had 1 event, 2 events, 3 events. Let's have a look at the event itself. So we've got event 1 on the 24th of December. It was a training event and the cost per guest was £40. The number of guests, 75. And we've got 2 different guests there, Smith and Singh. So that suggests to us that a number of guests can attend an event, because we've got guest ID 1, Smith, and guest ID 2, Singh. Let's just have a look at these dietary requirements for a minute, because this is quite important. If we just look at guest Smith, he went to event number 1, and he also went to event number 5. But if we look at his dietary requirements, at event number 1, it got none. But at event number 5, he wanted vegetarian. So that suggests to me that that dietary requirements depends on the guest and the event they went to. And you'll see this in action later on when we come to the design. Can a customer book more than one event? The answer is yes. For example, customer 1 has booked 1, 2, 3 events. Can an event be booked by more than one customer? So let's just have a look at event 1. It's only Green that's booked that. Let's have a look at event 3. It's only Lowry. That suggests to me that an event can only be booked by one customer. Can the event have many guests? And again, the answer to that is yes. If we look at event number 1, it's got 2 guests. If we look at event number 2, 1 guest. Event number 3 has 3 guests. So yes, an event can have many guests. And can a guest attend many events? So if we look at guest number 1, green, he has attended event number 1 and event number 5. Therefore, a guest can attend many events. The next thing to do is draw up an initial ERD. We know we've got entity customer, entity event and entity guest. So here we have our initial ERD. We've said we've got customer, can book many events. An event can have many guests, and a guest can attend many events. Next thing we need to do is add the primary keys. The primary keys for customer are customer ID. The primary key for event is event ID. And the primary key for guest is guest ID. We know in this example database we've got a many-to-many relationship between event and guest, because remember, an event can have many guests and a guest can attend many events. So what we need to do is resolve that many-to-many relationship. We can't implement that in Access, so we're going to change that many-to-many into 2 one-to-many relationships. So to break up that many-to-many, we create a new entity and we put it between event and guest. And here it is, the new entity, and we take the name for that new entity from the names of the 2 entities that we've just split up. So this new entity, this joining table, becomes event guest. Now the primary key for this new event we take from the 2 primary keys from the original entities, and together they make up the primary key for this new entity. So you can see here event ID becomes part of the key in the new entity, event ID, and guest ID becomes part of the new key in the new entity, and then we have event ID and guest ID. We're now going to add the foreign keys to the ERD. Again, if we just follow this process, we need to look at wherever we've got a many side of a relationship. So if we just look at between customer and event at the minute, we know that a customer can book many events. So there's the many side of the relationship. What we need to do is go to the one side of the relationship, so that's customer, take the primary key and place a copy of it in event as a foreign key. So there we can see we've got customer ID and use the asterisk to indicate it's a foreign key. Let's have a look at the relationship between guest and event guest. We know a guest can book many events, so it's guest to event guest. There's the many. We need to go to the one side of the relationship, guest, take a copy of the primary key, put it in event guest as a foreign key. Now that guest ID is already there because it's part of the primary key, so all we need to do is put the asterisk behind it. And then finally, let's have a look at this relationship between event and event guest. There's the many side of the relationship. Go to the one side, get the primary key, event ID. We need a copy of that in event guest. There it is. Again, it's already there because it's part of the primary key. All we need to do is put an asterisk behind it. The next stage of our design of our ERD is to add the attributes. Here we have our ERD. And what I've done is taken each attribute and decided which primary key does it belong with, which primary key is it dependent on. So we've got customer ID as a primary key, the customer name is dependent on that customer ID, the house number, the postcode and the phone number are all dependent on that customer ID, because for each customer those are those attributes that make up that customer. Let's have a look at guest ID, pretty straightforward one. We've just got the guest surname there, and that's dependent on the guest ID. Let's have a look at this event guest. So remember, this is the joining table. And if you remember when I looked at the data, I said that dietary requirements needs to go somewhere special, because the dietary requirement depends on both the event and the guest. Because we've got one guest, one event had no dietary requirements, and the other had vegetarian requirements. So it depends on the event and the guest. And then finally, we've got the event ID primary key, the event date, the event type, the guest cost per event at that event, and the maximum number of guests at that event are all dependent on the event ID. That finishes our design of our database. Just a reminder, the aim here is to have no duplicated data. We need to store our data in one place only in our database, with the exception of a foreign key, and that is because a foreign key is a copy of a primary key from another table. And we need those in there to be able to form the relationships between the tables in Access. And if we look, we've only got customer name in one place, house number, etc. We've only got the event date in one place, the event type. We've only got the dietary requirements in one place, and we've only got the guest surname in one place.